So recently we saw the release of the latest installment of the DCEU and one of the last of the old era, the pre-James Gunn helmed era of the DCEU, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which serves as a sequel to the first Shazam film. And the first film told the story of Billy Batson, a kid in foster care that gains the power to turn into a superhero with the power of the gods, who in turn was forced to contend with the released 7 deadly sins led by the villainous Dr. Sivana, who were trying to take over the world and seize Billy's newfound powers. And of course, this doesn't work out so well for him, and Billy, alongside his newly empowered foster siblings, defeats Sivana and the sins and snaps his magical staff. And thus, he ends the supernatural threat, or so we're led to believe. And yeah, for the most part, that film did pretty well for itself. It got good critical scores, and it made a bit of money. Perhaps not as much as is the usual for superhero flicks, but considering this was a brand new hero that many had never heard of before, and the fact that DC's reputation was at that time in the toilet, it did well enough for itself financially. And so that brings us to the release of the sequel film, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Also, spoilers from here on out, okay? Good. Anyway, the sequel picks up a couple of years after the events of the first film, where our Shazam family, dubbed the Philly Fiascos, after having saved the world, have slowly moved on into their own pursuits, like a true family does. They fight. They aren't all as invested in the superheroism anymore. They want their own lives, and this has given Billy a bit of a crisis, as he has abandonment issues, and wants everything to stay the way as it was before. Anyway, turns out when he broke Sivana's staff, it brought down the barrier between Earth and the realm of the gods, and thus, the daughters of Atlas are able to come to Earth, repair the staff, and use it to take away the powers of Billy's family, whilst also stealing a golden apple with which they wish to revive their realm. And of course, one of the sisters goes rogue, and she betrays everybody else and decides to plant it on Earth instead to try and destroy the Earth and get revenge on humanity for reasons. And of course, from that point on, it's up to Billy to save the day, and he fights her, he does save the day, he kills her, he briefly dies, and then he's revived by Wonder Woman at the end of the film. And at the same time, his brother Freddy gets a 6,000-year-old girlfriend, which is interesting, and all is well for the family. And in a post-credit scene, Billy gets invited to join the Justice Society, which we saw in Black Adam, and which was very underwhelming. But who knows if anything's going to come out of that, considering they seem to be scrapping things after this block of films is finished releasing. Reboot. And so yeah, the response so far has been a bit mixed. I don't really have any box office figures at this stage since it's still a pretty new release and all, but it isn't exactly setting the world on fire in terms of its critical scores. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a critical score of 55% from 108 reviews, which, well, that's far lower than the first film, that's for sure. And it's starting to make me wonder if the era of acclaimed superhero films is well and truly coming to an end. First Ant-Man, now this, Black Adam last year. The quality of the releases is getting a little bit troubling if you ask me. Anyway, it was hated by critics it seems, but early reactions from fans seemed to be largely positive, as it's currently sitting on an 81% score off of 100 reviews as of writing this video. It might have changed since. So that's a pretty big difference between critical and audience. And I mean, that is pretty normal, because these early stages of release often have a lot of dissonance between the audiences and the professional reviewers. But for this film, I think I find myself landing somewhere in the middle, probably leaning closer to audiences who think the film was good. I don't think it's trash by any means. It's decent. Is it perfect? No. Is it great? No. But it's certainly entertaining, if at times a little bit plotting and cheesy, and honestly a bit cringy too. Both in good ways, as in they intend for you to cringe, and also in bad ways, where it's more the acting or the dialogue that's making you go, no. And I guess we'll start there. The story and the script and the characters. It's basically just the narrative elements. For the most part, I think they were handled quite well. The actual overarching story, that was fine. It was an interesting concept, and one that handled a lot of the same themes as the previous film. Feelings of loneliness, abandonment, found family. Those more personalized storylines, the mini-arcs for each character, both the children and the wizard, they were the best parts of this film. And indeed, the actual main plot with the Daughters of Atlas was quite well done as well, for the most part. When it was exciting and it was filled with action and drama. But when it was in a lull period, it really dragged on and on and on. And there were a lot of scenes where there was just not much actually happening. Just characters standing around being awkward or quipping and not really pushing forward the plot or the character arcs or the character relationships or anything. And so it felt a bit meh. In terms of characterization, I've seen worse. The kids were all good, especially Freddy, who was probably the most consistently written character as well. His teen and adult forms, they feel like the same character with the same personality. one's just a superhero. And indeed, that feels like it is reflected by the rest of the hero cast, except our main man, Billy. I don't know what they were doing here, but he did not seem like the same character at all. The younger Billy is pretty serious and angsty and lonely and needy. Super Billy, he's just a man-child making jokes and being stupid. Honestly, the adult Billy character feels more like it's just a different version of adult Freddy. And yeah, that's just not good writing, not good at all. Doesn't seem like the same person. So there you go, poorly written main protagonist. But on the other hand, I did like the writing for the Daughters of Atlas, and I enjoyed how they were all on a spectrum of evil. Anthea's, well, she's not completely heroic, but she is largely good, and she only hurts people for her goals. She doesn't enjoy it or revel in it. And then there's Hespera, who, well, she's not a nice woman, and she kills with no remorse and seems to somewhat enjoy doing it, but ultimately she's also not looking for mass genocide and simply wants to restore her realm to what it was, much like Anthea does. She just goes about it in a pretty brutal way. And then there's Calypso, who ends up betraying her sisters so she can take revenge on humanity for trapping them in the godly realm and stealing all their magic. And they all sit there on a scale of good, or at least bad, to genocidal maniac. And this in turn helped them all feel quite unique and interesting, and led into the plot twist where Calypso mortally wounds her older sister, who in turn helps Billy defeat her before she dies. I think my major criticism for the characters and the writing really is that the main antagonist, in the end who is the most important of the three sisters, Calypso, she's the worst written of them. She gets the least screen time overall until she becomes evil, and she has the least lines until suddenly she's taking things too far, and she betrays them all. And so ultimately the impact of that arc, her turning against them, is majorly lessened because she was pretty much a side character until that point. So it's like, oh, why should I care? And really, that's probably the major takeaway from the film. It's largely decent, but the story is really plotting, and the villain really sucks, both in terms of her writing, but also her acting. It's so wooden and cringy compared to everybody else. I don't know what was going on there, because a lot of the characters did have cringy dialogue that they were able to pull off, but it just didn't happen with Calypso. And so in the end, it made it hard to sit through her important scenes, and hard to engage with the overall ending of the film. And so really, whilst the film was watchable, it really isn't rewatchable. It's not something I'd want to see again. Better than something like Black Adam, but it really pales in comparison to some of DC's better films, so a 6 out of 10 for me. Nothing special, but not god-awful either. And so, yeah, nothing really else to say. And so with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. If you've seen the film, what did you think? Did you like it, hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.